Good morning, everyone, and welcome committee. Welcome committee members and members of the community. Please ensure that your devices or cell phones are either switched off or on silent mode whilst the meeting is in progress. If the cell phone interrupts the course of the meeting, then it's not in wait for it to be used. This meeting has been held in the supper room of the Waihinga Centre, the Martin Borough Town Hall. It is being live streamed, no technical difficulties this morning, and will be available to view on Council's YouTube channel. The emergency exits for this room are before you came in and the exit behind me. If we do need to evacuate the building, please use one of the exits and assemble outside by the playground. Please remain at the assembly area until the building has been confirmed clear. In the event we experience any unruly or intimidating behaviour from members of the community during the course of the meeting, we will adjourn until it is safe for us to reconvene. Members of the committee and staff will congregate in the office area behind me if this action is necessary. We'll open this morning's meeting with the opening karakia. So if you'd all like to stand and join me, that would be.
Kia hoi, kia nā, kia whakapapa pauna me te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou ki te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. Uie tai kie.
Thank you very much. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Plummer and Councillor Worley. For lateness and Violet as well as so do I have someone to move those apologies? Thank you, Councillor Eglins and Councillor May now to second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. Motion is carried. Do we have any conflicts of interest this morning? No. That being the case, would like to, whilst it's not on the agenda, I'd like to make available a moment for Councillor Olds to pay tribute.
Thank you for the opportunity to do so. I just want to acknowledge the passing of Margaret Craig. Margaret was a councillor around this table from 2010 until midway through 2019. Margaret was also at one stage deputy principal of Greytown School, and also taught in Featherston. Margaret was passionate about her many portfolios she held over the years, and they include things like Community Board, Road Safety Council, Waste Minimisation, and Council's representative on Cobblestones Trust. Margaret was a woman of small stature, but you knew when you crossed her path. Rest in peace, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. We will now continue with the morning and move into our local water dam well submissions hearing as per schedule. The first speaker we have this morning is Shane Atkinson. If you'd like to join us, Shane, the submission is located on page 61 of the agenda and page 1 of the speaker's pack. Mr. Atkinson, you are allocated 10 minutes to present to members of the committee. It is suggested that you make your presentation during the first 5 or 6 minutes and allow 4 or 5 minutes for questions from members. Your allocated time includes both your presentation time and time for questions from members. Start when you're ready, and Amy will give you a little wave at 9 minutes just to let you know we're coming to the end of your time.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you, and I won't read my submission. I've got some additional notes here which I hope you find helpful, understand what my views are and why I've formed them. I believe that the 3 Wairarapa councils and the Mataura Council should form their own 3 water entity, and that's fundamentally because there's an identity of scale and an identity of interest amongst our 11 small towns. And that's completely lacking in the existing relationship with Wellington Water, which is dominated by very large urban entities with very significant problems, which is what Wellington Water focus on. Now, as an aside, in long past discussion with the then Minister of Local Government, Nick Smith, he emphasised that commonality of interest was the key determinant in any of these local government arrangements. In order for 3Y+T to accept for ratepayers, future costs will need to fall within the existing council boundaries. I cannot emphasise that too strongly. You won't get a buy-in if costs to be distributed. The state of the existing water infrastructure, the costs of maintenance, the costs of new construction will vary depending on where people live, and they should accept that as being a consequence of where they choose to live. It's cheaper to live in Ekahuna than it is to live in Wellington, but it's going to cost you more to flush the loo and turn the tap on. And that's part and parcel of it. Inevitably, the smaller the entity, the fewer pans per kilometre, the higher the individual cost is. And there's just no chance of finding some large entity that's we're going to shovel our costs onto. That's not going to happen. You're not going to sell that at all. Any cost savings are going to have to come from design, financing, and operational efficiencies. You will not get them from passing costs on to other ratepayers. I think that's fundamental. And I can imagine the howling and snivelling from the good citizens of Masterton should there be any suggestion that they would pay for or have higher costs as a result of taking on board some of the smaller entities. There are 11 small towns in the 4 TOAs, local councils, and they all suffer from the same issues. While that may be a pity and the costs are going to be high, you're not going to find any way around that other than a more efficient and effective operational entity. Now, the issue of what the 3 wards entity look like is quite difficult. It'll need to contain sufficient in-house expertise to be able to source and manage contractors for the 3 wards task. And I can't emphasise that too strongly. You're going to have to know within the organisation what the task is and how it should be done. There's an example there for Ruamahanga Roads where you have within, if you like, within the council grasp, someone knows what the hell they're doing. And without that, you are simply going to fail. Now, one of the really difficult issues, and I've had some discussions with the major consultants about this, regardless of what you think of them, they have huge expertise in this area. There is a very thin pool of expertise in potable water and wastewater management in New Zealand. To actually set up an organisation for the 4 councils, which has within it sufficient expertise to look after capital maintenance and operations, is going to be a significant task. Every entity in New Zealand, every water entity is going to be chasing the same punt of all the same expertise. It's going to be a significant task. And the transition, as we saw with Wellington Water, can be hideous. It was very difficult to set up an effective organisation for the standing staff. And I've heard, what shall we say, surprising snivels from out the table. I saw one absolutely splendid example where I was down on the cycle trail on the Tiranika River, and the Wellington Water people were looking at the pipe, which was going to, the water pipe which supplies Featherston, which was going to cross the Tiranika River. There were 9 of them. There were 9 people who had come to look at where this pipe might not go. Now, you may be able to afford that in Wellington. You're sure as hell not going to afford that in your type in your 11 tiny towns. You're going to have an organisation which is smart, small, and contains in-house expertise. The governance of this entity is going to be extremely difficult as well, because you're going to need to have a long-term view of capital. Am I being waved to have?
Could you just mute? I'm sorry. Technical. No, technical, carry on.
The governance of this entity is going to be significantly difficult as well. because they're going to need to maintain forward programs for capital maintenance and operations well outside the 3-year term of elected members of council. And you're going to need to incorporate with the entity ratepayer participation, transparency and accountability, unless there's a new model of Three Waters legislated. Now, there's an example of that in the individual lines companies. There's similarities and differences there. But the line companies are regulated centrally by the Commerce Commission, and they manage the charges and service obligations to the electricity suppliers to your front door. But that requires, I'd probably say, significant impact of legislation from the central government. It's going to be very difficult to set up a council control organisation without some legislative clout. You're going to end up competing with all the others. It's going to be very ugly. The transition, managing the transition, is going to be a significant task. I swear it might take you 5 years to go from where you are now to an organisation which is up and running and which you can see how it works. So it has to be done, but it is not a small task. And the faces around this table will largely be gone by the time your new entity is in place. So the 3-year cycle is going to provide some real stress for setting up an organisation which is going to have a long-term view and not be subject to what should we say, focus from the changing councils. It's just the nature of the beast. But good on you guys for giving it a go. My view is very clear. You need to do a Three Waters entity. It needs to be community of interest with the small towns, and you need to go for it. Thank you.
Very
Shane.
much. Questions from the committee? Councillor Old, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Shane. And you've got a lot of detail. You've given us a lot of detail this morning, which is, I guess, a little bit broader than what your submission states. But I'm just, I picked up on the timeframes in establishing an entity as such. So there are some legislative requirements. Are you aware of the legislative requirements that councils have to do if they want to send up these entities? Sorry, it's a question back to you.
No, this wasn't my concern, this is your concern.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to know if you were clear on what we legislatively are required to do and the timeframes that we're given to set it up. Yeah. Thanks.
Martin.
Yes, I was interested, Shane, when I read your submission, basically you're saying the cost should fall when they lie.
Correct.
This council, for certainly as long as I can remember, has actually not adopted that approach. It's adopted when it comes to wastewater, that is, and water, we share the costs equally amongst everyone who's connected.
Within the council.
Within the council.
Yes.
Yeah. So my suggestion is that the costs should continue to lie within the council footprint even in the future.
Well, my question is, why would you say that when, I mean, arguably taking the conclusion of your argument to its kind of logical endpoint, you would say, therefore, that Turanoa should pay for its own waste, Greytown should, Featherston should, and those costs are likely to be different in different places at different times. Not quite sure why you would sort of partition those four together. Carlton just stands on its own, for example.
Yeah. And the answer is very simple. You won't sell this to the other councils unless you ring-fence the current costs and obligations within the existing council boundaries.
Thank you very much. That is end of time.
Thanks,
So
Shane.
thank you for your time this morning, Shane. Much appreciated. And your feedback has, well, all of the submissions be considered as part of our deliberations in the coming weeks. Just mindful of just being careful with our questions of clarification, just making sure that they are. Thank you. We have Adrian Young Cooper next on our list, but Adrian is not here at the minute, but I believe Bill is. So Bill, if you'd like to join us. Bill's submission is agenda page number 143 and speaker packet page number 6. As with Shane, we have 10 minutes. We do ask that you leave us some time for questions at the end, and Amy will give you a wave and you're at about 9 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Appears in a lot of committees in my life. For some reason I feel nervous now.
Don't look.
We're not there. Look, yes, look, can I take it as read that people have read my
Yes.
submission?
Take your paper as read and speak to the points that you want to enhance or add to.
I'll just start by saying it's a small typo in the first paragraph. I referred to SimTech, it should of course be STEMTech in the first paragraph of my submission. Now, at the risk of enhancing my reputation as a grumpy old man, I'd just like to make 3 or 4 criticisms up front. First is the timeline. I question the appropriateness of it. I honestly do think that if someone takes a couple of days to get to grips with 4 discussion papers, analyse them, bring my own experience to bear on the issues, write them down and come down to Martin where to present them, I think 7 minutes is a bit mean, but I'd ask for a bit of latitude on that if it's possible. Not that I'm telling you very much on that. Secondly, as I say in my submission, I felt it quite inappropriate for council to be labelling a CCO option as proposed. We're going out for consultation. It is no big deal, but I think it would have been far better to say it was preferred option. There are other options, incidentally. Third issue, failure to address the standalone option. I know why you didn't address it, but again, why not tell the people why it's not an option? And fourthly, I thought the paper would have benefited from a precise statement of the new statutory requirements and constraints so that the reader can separate facts from interpretation. Anyway, so I think it's a good paper and congratulate the council. I should say from the outset, I do support the option, the CCO option, for the reasons I bulleted at the end of the last page of my written submission. The CCO model going some way towards addressing the perceived deficiencies of the 3 waters, portable waters and Wellington water models, possesses some of the weaknesses of those models. But if the premises underlying the legislation are correct, the advantages will appear to outweigh the disadvantages. And as I say in my submission, addressing the design of the proposed CCO, I think it's important that we keep in mind what were perceived as the weaknesses of those 2 other models. So I've devoted the first 200 pages of my submission to just outline the weaknesses and those models are there for your reference, so I won't go into them. On page 3, I deal briefly with a standalone or in-house option not canvassed. I note my assumption this was not mentioned because, unlike the situation with CDC and Marston, this was not considered a practical option for South Wairarap's part of this financial situation. I wouldn't be able to meet the Act's financial sustainability criteria because it contained virtually no in-house capabilities pursuant to the decision to join up with Wellington Water. Putting that aside, I note that the in-house option appears to have some significant advantages, which I list, in comparison with the CCO option. And frankly, I can't help wondering why CDC and Marston have been so quick to embrace the CCO model. Both said that they could meet financial sustainability criteria. Interesting. In section 4 on page 4, I list the main drivers of change, and no need for me to recite those. And I endeavour to focus on the main reasons advanced by the council for supporting the proposed CCO model. The support for the model seems to rest on two key premises. Well, one in actual fact. The key premises will enable veterans and more reliable access to long-term funding, improve borrowing power, upgrades to upgrade new water infrastructure, allowing the spread of debt over many years, making water services more affordable. Now, councils obviously need to be satisfied that this is in fact a lot of proofs. I mean, is it? What proof have we got of that? Anyway, the government obviously believes this is the way to go, so we're going. The second premise is that teaming up with other councils will result in more efficient, consistent and cost-effective delivery of services due to economies of scale, avoidance of duplication of effort, etc. As well as streamlined work program, etc. Now, again, the Commerce Commission, when they commented on the Three Waters proposals way back, they said they could find no evidence of economies of scale for those large entities. We're talking about a large entity again, aren't we? I must say it has occurred to the cynic in me that some councils may see the CCCO option as a convenient way of getting the difficulties, the inherent difficulties and costs associated with the provision of water services off their books, reduce pressure on rates, weaken their own accountability constituents in that regard. Be that as it may, it appears that unlike CDC and Marston DC, South Wairarapa has no other alternative but to support the CCO model, given the new statutory requirements and the standards and the financial sustainability. So in some ways, the council's birds are coming home to roost through inadequate investment over the years of some key decisions, such as one to join Wellington Water. Council appears to be faced with no other option. Section 5, I could say there's some reservations, and say there's some questions there are. This is a complex situation we're facing, and so I have these reservations, which I would actually briefly like to quickly read, because I think some of them at least, because page 5 we've got time, because I think they're quite important. Council consider some of these things. The question of council ownership, as I've said there, that this is somewhat misleading, and I've given my reasons. That council, relatives of participating councils will lose direct ownership. They retain a form of ownership by way of their shareholding in the CCO, but this will be a collective ownership. Because assets, reserves, liabilities, etc. are to be vested in the CCO. One wonders to what extent the rights normally conferred on owners by ownership will be diminished, and if so, does this matter? Council control, again, misleading. I realise that the label has political appeal and derives from legislation, but the reality is that individual councils will experience a certain loss of direct control over the management of water assets and how services are delivered, and this is acknowledged in the papers. They will be able to exercise a degree of indirect control via their representation on the proposed shareholder committee, which advises the board of directors, see below. But because each council will have different priorities and aspirations, it appears they will only be able to influence decisions and priorities by engaging in a process of debate with the reps of other councils and iwi. The model relies on cooperative endeavour, and to that extent there will be no room for parochialism or dogmatic insistence on achieving the objectives of an individual council. Might be wrong on this, is my perception. A new concept, is it achievable? A loss of direct local control and inevitably translated into a weakening of the accountabilities of individual councils to their local communities for water services. This will not necessarily result in the CCOs not being accountable to the public, providing it is compensated for by other clearly specified accountabilities. Is it appropriate to include Tauru in the proposed CEO? I actually think it quite clearly isn't, but nevertheless, I've given my reasons there, and I would add to that, that occurred to me later on, I didn't put it down here, but if the future is for a unitary authority between the three Wairarapa councils, then isn't it logical to keep this to the three councils so that there can be a seamless transition? If the whole thing falls over, there can be a seamless transition to an in-house model with the attendant advantages, which I listed: direct accountability, direct control. So I think Tararua should be booted out of it. It's more logical they be ended up in Hawke's Bay or
Excuse me, Bill, that is your 10 minutes. So if you'd just like to wrap up your presentation, that would be.
Okay, I'll just wrap it up by saying on the next page, if you read nothing else, I'd implore you to read that, because it's all about accountability. And I think that's the key to the whole thing. That's where Wellington Water fell over. No accountability, no transparency, no accountability. Ratepayers are all moaning. The mayor's wondering what the hell happened. You know, it's a pretty sad scenario. So I've outlined then, based on my experience, what I think accountability means. And I've made a distinction between internal and external accountability. I'll just leave it there.
That's lovely. Given that the person behind you is not here, I will allow for one or two questions of clarification. So Councillor Old, start with you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bill. Quite a comprehensive submission, I must admit, and makes some interesting reading. I'm just wondering if you're aware of the role of the economic regulator in the function of overseeing the water delivery services model.
The Commerce Commission.
Commerce Commission, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you are aware of that, yeah.
I would say that, you know, this whole thing based on the idea that you can weaken local accountabilities providing you strengthen the external accountabilities via the central government mechanisms. And, you know, again, being as old as I am, I'm very cynical about that. I look at how successful the Commerce Commission has been in, for example. Environment background at one stage, and I can just, in the Ministry of Health, you know, how successful they've been in imposing national water drinking standards, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it's a complex picture.
Thanks, Bill.
Bill, sorry, can I ask you one question just to be really, really clear? At the end of your conclusions, you say, notwithstanding reservations and queries I support council's proposed CCO option. Can I just be really clear, when you say CCO option, is it the 4 councils, Y plus T model, or the standalone CCO option?
No, I'm not supporting the standalone.
So it is Y.
I didn't express that correctly. I support the CCO model because there appears to be no other option, just subject to the caveat that I think serious consideration should be asked to, given to asking the Tararua people to set a step aside.
Thank you. And final question from Councillor Elands.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks a lot, Bill, for your submission and also taking the time. I mean, it was great to read the detail the submission, which has been, all the papers and stuff have been analysed, not only just reading the out information for this council, but also the information from the other three councils as well.
It's other 4 councils, there's obviously been cooperation and formulating the 4 different discussion papers, but they all say things differently. And there are some quite significant differences in what they're saying. So
I got that through your, through yours.
I didn't unlike Mr. Atkinson, I didn't want to go into all the detail of how all this might unfold because there's a hell of a way to go yet. So I tried to keep the comments at a high level.
I appreciated that. The analytics and the detail broken down. Thank you.
Right, that is fabulous. So thank you very much for all your time, Bill, not just today, but for putting this paper together. Much appreciated. And like I said to Shane, your submission and your presentation will all be considered as part of deliberations in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bill, if you'd like a job, sure we can find you one.
There's one thing I meant to add right at the end was this is going to be a complex task, but in my background, I was part of an establishment unit. So when you're managing change, the typical thing is to set up an establishment unit, and that of course would have reps from all the councils on it, but the composition of that establishment unit is critical.
Yeah.
I had people self-financial house.
Yeah.
Legal house.
Yeah.
So I understand. Transparency. And
Well done.
Yeah, well said.
We'll just adjourn for a moment because our next speakers are not here.
What is that one?
Or maybe you need to.
Great. There you go.